On this episode of MythBusters,
We've been driving on the freeway.
Adam and Jamie go green for science
I'm actually getting kind of excited about this.
and kick their engineering expertise into full throttle
When I was a kid, I would have killed for one of these. Were you ever a kid?
No.
as they pit bike against car for the ultimate eco challenge.
We're just getting started, too.
It'd be awesome!
Meanwhile, Carrie, Tori, and Grant
Come here often?
raid the arsenal for an explosive filmic fable
You're John Malkovich. You don't get any here.
and unleash the first RPG in MythBusters history. To find out if a bullet can beat a rocket-propelled grenade. Who are the MythBusters? Adam Savage
Working on these machines is great for my stand.
and Jamie Heineman.
Are you done screwing around?
Between them, more than 30 years of special effects experience. Together with Carrie Byron, Tori Belleci,
You ready to get your head cut off?
and Grant Imahara.
Save yourselves.
They don't just tell the myths, they put them to the test.
Jamie, you're a fan of motorcycles, right?
Ever since I was 16.
Really? They've had motorcycles that long?
Here we go.
Okay. There is a trend apparently going on where people, including fans of MythBusters, are trading in their cars and driving motorcycles instead because they believe that's the more environmentally friendly choice.
And what's their logic?
Their logic is simply that because motorcycles are generally more fuel efficient than cars, they burn less gas and thus they must be better for the environment.
Sounds sensible.
But there are people that say not only is that not true, they claim that motorcycles pollute far worse than cars.
Well, that sounds like something we need to investigate.
I totally agree.
There's no doubt both cars and bikes produce gases that can be harmful to the environment. And supposedly being smaller and using less fuel means that bikes produce less. So is there fuel to this fire? Are motorcycles a greener machine than cars?
Well, clearly this involves getting a bunch of different cars and motorcycles, testing them and comparing the results, right?
Right, but which ones? I mean, there's tens of thousands of makes and models of each. What do we choose?
Well, why don't we get some of the most popular models of the last 3 decades?
A representative sample, right. Some cars and bikes from the 80s, the 90s, and the noughties. The noughties are 2000 till 2010. That sounds like a perfect way to do this.
Well, let's get our hands dirty.
Okay.
Whoa, where are we?
This will be our base of operations. Let's walk you through the particulars.
These are our test cars. We've got a car from the 80s, a car from the 90s, and a car from the noughties. We've also got some motorcycles. We've got one from the 80s, one from the 90s, and one from the noughties. We've chosen them based on their popularity within their respective decades.
And obviously for this test, all those cars and bikes are going to do some driving.
There is literally nothing fancy about the route we'll be driving today. No tricky maneuvers, no extreme road conditions. It is simply a 30-minute drive spread out over 20 miles and split 75% freeway driving and 25% city driving.
So how are we going to measure our emissions? Well, that's where these guys come in. They're from the Clean Air Technologies Division of Global MRV, and they've brought with them something called the PEMS, or Portable Emissions Measuring System. And basically, you know when you take your car in to get it smogged? Well, that's what the PEMS does, except it's more accurate in its real world, because you put it in the vehicle, you stick a probe in the exhaust, you hook it up to the engine, and you drive the car or the motorcycle around for a while, and voila, instant data.
Instant data, that is all important for this test. The PEMS will track every kind of emission, including the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide, the smog-causing carbon monoxide, and the nasty oxides of nitrogen.
The numbers we get should be precise enough to allow us to call whether the motorcycles or the cars are better for the environment.
And with 6 vehicles, that's a lot of driving.
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this. All right, here we go.
But thanks to the wonders of non-linear editing,
Okay, this is bike. versus car.
The 30-minute test for the 80s,
80s. Pollution test in 3,
90s,
2,
and noughties
1, go.
can take place simultaneously.
And we're off. Dun, 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 dun. A left turn takes us into the neighborhood where we can do some city driving.
Jamie's keeping up nicely. Everyone's going roughly the same speed. Test is going perfect.
Everything is going perfectly. And Adam's running commentary gives us a very special insight.
Ooh, I just burped and tasted a little bit of my lunch, enchiladas.
As the guys gather their data,
I must say I never quite understood the dogs in sweaters thing. I mean, they're cute as blazes, but I like petting my dog. I don't like petting a sweater. I'm really glad we had this time alone that we can talk.
after a few minutes of city driving, the freeway portion of the testing begins.
I am driving for scientific testing on the freeway in Northern California. I'm followed by Jamie and following a police car to gather the pollution data.
This monologue, it's not even half crazy. It's like full crazy.
Full crazy. And there is one preoccupation that plagues Adam as he drives.
You'll notice at this point in the drive, I haven't picked my nose yet. That's on purpose.
I still have not picked my nose on camera. I hope you appreciate my self-restraint. Oh, is that a nose pick? Did you catch a nose pick on camera? That was more like a swipe, but technically the tip of my finger did enter my nose. Oh, another one. Oh my God, it's happened.
While Adam's been keeping himself entertained, a traditionally stoic Jamie has been putting the bikes through their paces. Eventually, after 30 minutes in each vehicle, the testing comes to a close, and Adam finishes how he began.
We've been driving on the freeway, testing our emissions in motorcycles and the car.
Thank you. Thank you very much. After a full day of driving, we've done 3 runs with 6 vehicles and collected 24 separate points of data. Home sweet home. There we go. So that's it?
Yeah.
It's time to head back to the shop and see what it means.
Next up, the guys are seeing red with an explosive myth.
You're gonna love this.
Why?
Because after 180 or so episodes, we finally found an excuse to use a rocket launcher.
Yes! What are we testing? This one comes from the movie Red, Retired and Extremely Dangerous.
Okay, here's the scene. There's a standoff. Our hero has a revolver, and our villain has a rocket-propelled grenade.
They both fire, and the bullet and the RPG meet in mid-air. The bullet triggers the RPG, causing a huge explosion, killing the villain, and the hero walks away unscathed.
So that's 2 rocket-propelled grenade myths for the price of 1. Will a bullet trigger the warhead? And when it explodes, would it really be bye-bye Rocketeer, with only the bad gal going up in flames? So, where to start?
All right, 2 myths, 1 scene. Now, the first one is, can you set off a round from an RPG using a bullet?
Well, to begin with, I think we need to match both the gun and the rocket launcher from the movie. Then we point them at each other and fire. Simple, right?
Okay, besides being a logistical nightmare, you can't shoot a rocket launcher in California. But I know a place we can.
Luckily, the team have friends in high explosive places, so they head to the MythBusters Rocketeering HQ.
To test the myth of our RPG handgun face-off, we've come to one of our favorite places.
New Mexico Tech sort of feels like a second home.
Why do we love this place so much? Well, they have 40 square miles of testing facility where they have gun ranges and bomb sites. How can you get any better than that?
Well, by throwing in a license to fire these.
So for this myth, we have 3 questions we need to ask. 1, how does an RPG work? Which end does a rocket go in? 2, what happens when an RPG and a bullet meet midair? And 3, when they do meet and the explosion goes off, who survives?
And question 1, how does it work? Calls for a little RPG 101 with John Merkel.
John, we've fired a lot of guns on the show, but never an RPG. Could you fill me in on the basic components?
Okay, this is the launcher. It's pretty simple. It's basically a bunch of metal tubes welded together, and this is the rocket. So when it fires, it kicks the RPG out of the tube, and partway to the target, the rocket motor lights and makes it accelerate.
And what actually causes the fuse to arm?
Setback. G-forces, when it comes out of the tube, it goes from 0 to 140 meters per second in about 6 milliseconds, so it's experiencing a lot of Gs.
Is this as dangerous as it looks?
Right now, no, because it's not armed. You have to fire it out of the launcher to arm it. That's when it gets really dangerous. But like any explosive, if you do something stupid with it, it can be very dangerous.
So, can we fire it?
Unfortunately, no, that's my job, but I will let you pick my target.
Okay, good, because we've got the perfect target for you.
This is ridiculous! Anybody wants to talk to me, I'll be in my trailer!
Eventually, Tori is coaxed out of his trailer because it's time for the practical demo of exactly how the RPG works.
All right, do you guys realize this is the first time in the history of MythBusters that we've ever shot an RPG?
All right, this is RPG versus trailer, just to see what it does.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's gone. The trailer is completely gone.
That was so fast.
That was so much more energetic than I thought.
That didn't look anything like you see in the movies.
That was like bang, bang. Let's check the wreckage.
Yeah, right.
Outside, they find a trail of RPG devastation. Or should that be an RPG devastated trailer?
Wow, that is a scary amount of destructive force right there.
Well, now we know how an RPG works.
Yep, they couldn't have asked for a better demonstration.
That was an incredible amount of devastation. That trailer didn't stand a chance. And the other thing is, it doesn't look like it does in the movies. In the movies, you see like a white plume. This is like bang, bang, and it was over.
And after looking at the high speed of the trailer, we noticed one thing. After the trailer exploded, we saw hot molten copper continue on and actually burn holes into the steel armor behind it. The reason being is because an RPG isn't like a typical grenade that has an explosive charge that throws shrapnel. It actually has an inverted copper cone that is surrounded by a shape charge. And when that hits the target, the charge goes off and it actually pushes that copper out into a hot molten slug of copper that burns through steel.
So not only is the RPG explosion nothing like the movie, it also throws forward a molten copper surprise, which doesn't bode well for the hero.
Now we need to see what happens when a bullet meets an RPG.
The hard part is going to be getting those two to match up.
Let's get to work.
That was incredible.
The MythBusters have been behind the wheel and in the saddle to find out which is greener, the car or the bike. And finally, the data is in. So after some swift consulting, equating, and calculating, the guys have the emissions verdict.
After running the numbers and looking at the outputs of pollutant gases from all the vehicles and getting some expert analysis from Professor Kent Johnson of the University of California, Riverside, we came up with some surprising results.
First up in the MythBusters motorcycle versus car data crunch is fuel efficiency.
Across all of the vehicles, the results were consistent. Motorcycles use less fuel than cars.
Which makes sense. Motorcycles are lighter than cars, and thus they require less energy to push themselves forward.
And you'd think that using less fuel would make them better for the environment.
But you'd be wrong. From an emissions standpoint, let's take a look at the most populous of the gases that these vehicles put out, carbon dioxide.
It's nasty. It's a greenhouse gas, so it contributes to global warming. and it makes up 90% of the emissions of an internal combustion engine.
And because it's a direct byproduct of burning fuel, motorcycles, which burn less fuel, consistently produced less carbon dioxide than cars. But the other pollutant gases we measured tell a totally different story.
Hydrocarbons, for example, cause smog, cancer, asthma, emphysema, and a host of other nasties, and motorcycles produce far more than cars.
Oxides of nitrogen, responsible for smog, lung ailments, and acid rain. Motorcycles produced up to 3,200% more than cars.
And carbon monoxide is an air pollutant and poisonous for animals to breathe. Well, motorcycles produce up to 8,000% more than cars.
In summary, while we found that motorcycles were more fuel efficient than cars and put out a lot less carbon dioxide, the amount of polluting gases they put out was vastly worse.
This myth is about someone that traded their car for a motorcycle because they believed it was better for the environment.
And they were wrong. At best, it's a wash. Motorcycles are just as bad for the environment as cars. At worst, they're far worse.
Yep, the data doesn't lie. The cars are cleaner, but bikes and MythBusters go way back, and they're not done yet. By combining Heinemann ingenuity with savage savvy, they're taking this myth to the max.
Now that is a cool looking design.
Can they put bikes back on track by creating the ultimate clean green machine?
It's starting to look sexy.
KTG are taking on an RPG. And it's got nothing to do with role-play. In this movie myth, the villain is taken out by their own rocket-propelled grenade, all because of a well-timed bullet.
Now, so far, we've seen what happens when an RPG hits a trailer. And it turns out it's not looking so good for the myth. Because once an RPG detonates, it fires a stream of molten copper through and beyond the target. But you know what? This is MythBusters. We can't give up here. What we want to look at next is what happens when a bullet meets an RPG. Can it even trigger?
Indeed, but getting a tiny bullet to hit the warhead on the head is tricky. Luckily, by joining forces with NMT, they've come up with a solution.
All right, Leonard, you built this system. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, this was actually designed, Tori, from friends of ours up in Huntsville, Alabama, Arctic, and they call it rocket on a rope.
So it's kind of like soap on a rope, but a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, a lot more power.
More powerful and more deadly. And here's why.
Now, obviously, this isn't a real RPG. This is an inert one because we're not crazy. Right here is our launcher. It's a steel tube. The RPG will go into that. Right here is where our firing pin will be. Once that starts, pressure will build up inside this pipe, and it'll push our rocket on the sled down these lines towards our gun.
That quick change in acceleration arms the warhead, and it travels down this line, which is tensioned at 3,000 pounds, so it can handle the rocket and keep it on a level and straight path. When that sustainer motor kicks in, that's when we really start cooking.
Now, at some point along the line, the RPG will actually hit a tripwire that will activate our gun. Now, I know this doesn't look like the gun in the movie, but it does exactly the same thing. And the bullet, which is the same caliber as in the movie, will come firing out of here right into the tip of the RPG. And then we'll finally find out what happens when bullet meets RPG.
With their ingenious rocket on a rope rig primed and the gun loaded, it's time to hunker in the bunker.
Okay, RPG versus bullet.
Go for launch. All right, here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Whoa!
Do you think maybe the bullet disabled it?
I don't know. High speed.
Let's go look at the high speed.
Check the high speed.
It all happened in the blink of an eye. But it does seem like there was a trip-up with the tripwire.
So is that a negative on the bullet?
No gunfire.
This is one of the most challenging myths to test.
We knew this was going to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for our rocket on a rope, the misfire wasn't the only problem.
So our first test, we were not able to hit the RPG with the bullet. And there was a couple of reasons for that. One, the lines were not tight enough. So as the rocket came down the line, it was bouncing around. By the time it got to the bullet, it was actually out of line with the barrel of the gun. Not only that, the bullet didn't even fire. The trigger was not sensitive enough. So we've made some adjustments. We've put more tension on the line. That way that'll keep that rocket stable, and we have a more sensitive trigger. So that way by the time the rocket gets to the barrel, the gun will fire. And then finally we'll find out, will an RPG get set off by a bullet?
With the rig adjusted and a new warhead loaded, it's back underground for round 2.
I think it's time for another shot.
All right, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Wow, it definitely exploded. I don't know if it was because of the bullet.
Hard to tell.
Let's look at the high speed.
Oh, this is crazy.
Crazy with a capital C. And it looks like they've gotten bullet versus RPG success.
There's the tripwire. Bullet.
It works! The bullet can set up an RPG!
Dude, that's amazing.
All right, so that part of the myth is confirmed.
Amazing and confirmed, and all down to an incredible rig.
We are so impressed. This was such a feat of engineering. New Mexico Tech actually created a rig where the tip of an RPG could hit the tip of a bullet. That's like 2 pencil erasers coming at each other at 1,000 miles an hour. And the myth is starting to look pretty good here.
Now, to nail down who actually lives and who dies in this myth, we've got to do a few things. We've got to find out how fast the bullet travels, how fast the RPG travels, and then we can figure out where in the 80 feet between the good guy and the bad guy they would meet. So that means we need to get some bullets, we need to get some RPGs, and we can go shooting.
So for the oxides of nitrogen, the hydrocarbons, and the carbon monoxide, the bikes put out more pollution than the cars, but somehow I don't feel like you're done with this story.
No, I'm not, and here's why. Ultimately, the amount of pollution that comes out of a bike has to be related to the amount of fuel that goes into it. And while it's true that bikes are lighter and smaller than cars, and so they use less fuel, they'd use even less if they were more aerodynamic.
Right, the fact is that bikes are totally aerodynamically inefficient. That upright rider presents a huge block to the wind. They're not designed like cars to slip through the air.
Exactly, and so what I'm wondering is if we made a bike super streamlined, could we reduce its fuel usage to such a degree that it would actually beat the fuel pollution standards of cars?
You want to build a super streamlined bike and put it to the test.
I do.
I love it, let's do it.
The plan is to create an aerodynamically efficient bike. And for that, the MythBusters fire up the old gray cells for one heck of a brainstorm.
So, making one of those super aerodynamically efficient, how do we do it?
Well, it's got to be some kind of a shell, and it's got to be lightweight and pretty much got to cover the whole thing.
In this concept cyclone,
Something like a teardrop with the bike in the middle.
a whole load of ideas are thrown up in the air.
I was thinking more like a tuna, where the tip can be a little bit more pointed. It's kind of like an igloo. What if this thing was like a big sphere?
And just like lightning, one idea strikes them as the best way to go.
I'm actually getting kind of excited about this because motorcycles are these wonderfully kind of macho things, and I see this kind of idea of a comet or a fireball kind of a thing as being really pretty sexy.
The center of the sphere obviously has to be the center of the pivot. Then the thing does not change shape.
Right,
whether you're
exactly,
turning or not.
Which I love.
As the storm clears, the guys have worked out all the elements.
These are steel.
Like ribs.
Yeah, secure it, and then you cut out an access port sized door. These would be covered by heat shrink.
And have not just a design, but a plan too.
Now that is a cool looking design. I've never seen anything like that before.
If we did this, and we did this in the tubular steel, it's a really nice divide and conquer design.
I love it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
After a tremendous amount of back and forth, we have a plan, and that is it. With a little bit of bent tube steel, some heat shrink plastic, and a couple of dozen hours, I think we'll have our bike fairing.
I'm followed by Jamie and following a police car to gather the pollution data.
It seems that cars have the edge on bikes when it comes to being green.
We found that motorcycles were more fuel efficient than cars and put out a lot less carbon dioxide. The amount of polluting gases they put out was vastly worse.
So now the guys are creating a super streamlined motorcycle to increase its fuel efficiency and minimize its emissions.
Now, a lot of bikes normally have fairings on them, which are plastic cowlings that cover the front portion of the bike to reduce wind resistance. In our case, we're going to get considerably more involved, however, and we're going to build a fairing that covers the entire bike, its passenger included.
A little more crouchy than that.
This device will cocoon the cyclist inside, making it more aerodynamic, greener, and eco-competition for the car.
This is our stripped-down bike, and very soon a bunch of steel like this is going to make the frame for our fairing. And the frame is going to be comprised of two parts. One is large overarching circle, which Jamie is going to ring roll, and a bunch of horizontal ellipses, which I'm going to hand bend with a conduit bender.
Getting the steel frame perfect is crucial, as the design literally hangs off of it.
I love bending metal.
Soon, what starts out as a series of bent steel rods is welded together to become one half of the fairing.
Wow. That is a pretty thing.
It is, isn't it?
I don't care what it's for. It's just plain lovely.
Yeah, let's make a whole bunch of them.
A little more measuring, welding, and bending, and they've got what looks like a giant hamster ball.
That is freaking sexy, man.
More surface area, but it's smoother.
Oh yeah, totally.
With the sphere complete, they cut out the part where the bike will go.
I like it.
When I was a kid, I would have killed for one of these. Were you ever a kid?
No.
And since the bike fits snugly, it's time for the Comet to get its tail.
How about that?
That is freaking awesome. It's starting to look sexy.
It's kind of different, you know?
You know what I realized it is? It's one of the space pods from 2001.
Oh yeah, I was trying to place it.
Dude, that is insane. It looks awesome.
It's perfect.
I don't think we could have made it any narrower, tighter. Really, there's almost nothing wasted in this shape. It's a perfect teardrop.
A perfect teardrop. But there's just one more thing to complete their aerodynamic design.
So this frame that we've spent all this time building isn't what makes this bike more aerodynamic. It's actually the skin we put on top of this frame that will do all of that work. And this is our skin. It is a roughly clear plastic that shrinks when you heat it. So we're going to put it all over this frame. Then we're going to heat it with a blowtorch until it's drum tight. And that ought to make this the aerodynamic, fuel-efficient bike of our dreams.
An aerodynamic bike of their dreams, and all by reducing a little thing called drag.
Now, we know that the motorcycle is less aerodynamic than a car, and that is because of drag. The best way to visualize drag is to take a look at this clip. You see the ink floating behind the vehicle? That is a low-pressure bubble of air that the vehicle has to drag around because it's not properly aerodynamic. Our thinking is that the smooth front and sharp tail of our fairing will allow the motorcycle to slice through the air, spending less of its energy driving and saving fuel. If we're able to save enough fuel, the emissions might finally dip below that of the cars.
That's looking great, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's cooling down right now.
That's when it shrinks, huh?
Yeah.
And in no time at all, the fairing is skinned.
That is really, really pretty. That just looks freaking awesome.
That was worth the wait.
The fairing is finally complete, and just as the guys anticipated, the bike looks like a teardrop crossed with a comet.
It's like giving birth, but in reverse. Lowering the back hatch now.
Okay.
What do you think?
It's not at all uncomfortable once you're in here.
That's great.
Not at all uncomfortable, but its real test will be on the road. It may seem unlikely, but the team has proved that a bullet can trigger an RPG. Now, they need to know where in the air they would meet.
Ready to do some science?
You know I am.
Down at the gun range, first they need to find out the speed of the speeding bullet.
So what we are trying to find out is where between the two dueling shooters, the bullet and the RPG meet. Now, we've set up a scale 80 feet long, just like two 40-foot truck containers, like the scene in the movie. So what we're gonna do is shoot the gun and the RPG, measure how fast each of them are going, then we'll be able to calculate exactly what point the two meet and the explosion happens.
And just how far away that explosion is from the shooter and the Rocketeer.
So here's how the experiment's gonna work. We're gonna use the same gun they had in the movie, a Smith & Wesson 460. It has a muzzle velocity of 2,200 feet per second. We're gonna fire it through this piece of foil, which will start the timer. The bullet will hit this plate, firing the switch and stopping the timing sequence. We're gonna do it at 40 and 80 feet. And through that, we should be able to see where along the path the bullet and the RPG meet.
Keep going, stop.
So first up, Tori's packing the heat.
Dude, this thing's so big, it looks like a cartoon gun.
To find out the speed of the bullet at 40 feet.
All right, this is the speed of the bullet from 40 feet. Good shot. Let's go see what you got.
All right, see how fast that went.
Pretty fast. 22 milliseconds to be precise.
It turns out from 40 feet away, it takes 22 milliseconds to hit the target. Now we're gonna move back to 80 feet and see how long it takes to hit the target.
Next, it's Grant's turn to turn on the firepower.
But I'm not gonna do this one standing up. I'm gonna do this one on a rest because not only am I not John Malkovich, but I'm not retired and I'm only moderately dangerous. Okay, this is timing the bullet from 80 feet. Are you ready?
Ready.
Got it.
See, you're not mildly dangerous. You're a bad man. All right, let's see how fast it took.
What do we got?
42 milliseconds.
Perfect.
That adds up.
All right.
After a hard day's shooting, the guys have the bullet speed. Now, to the second part of the equation, the rocket-propelled grenade.
It's a good day to be a Mythbuster.
Got that right.
So we know how fast the bullet flies. Now it's time for us to find out how fast the RPG goes. We're gonna take our RPG-7 launcher, set it up in the test stand, put our scales behind it, and plot the data points. And from that, we'll be able to find out where the bullet and the RPG are likely to meet.
Whoa. And all that means is setting up the gauges just as before. But the wind has other ideas.
You know, whenever I'm in 60-mile-an-hour wind, I like to put up a big sail.
Whoa! Last time we went on a Mythbusters road trip, we were in way steep snow and 60-mile-an-hour wind. We thought, that's our extreme weather for the year. This time, 60-mile-an-hour winds and blazing sunshine. Oh, our family vacations are crazy.
Finally, the wind dies down. The rocket is primed, and it's firing time.
Okay, here we are.
All right, now we can find out where the bullet and the rocket meet.
Okay, this is RPG speed test.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You see flash, boom.
Okay, you can't see it traveling. You definitely need the high speed. Let's go do some calculations.
Cool. Let's do some math.
But before they get to the math, the power of the RPG has the team distracted.
Wow, it totally penetrated. It went all the way through.
That is crazy.
That's like 3-inch armor plate.
Well, let's find out how fast it went.
All right.
All right, well, let's use multiple data points because there's 2 stages. We reached 20 feet in 43 milliseconds, 40 feet in 83.6 milliseconds, 60 feet at 125 milliseconds, and 80 feet at 161.3 milliseconds.
Okay, so if we flip this around, we see that the bullet and the RPG meet at 64 feet. So that's 64 feet from the bullet firer and 16 feet from the RPG firer.
All right, so why don't we set up the RPG at that point between the 2 shooters and see which one of them survives.
If anybody.
It's a given that if something's aerodynamic, it'll slice through the air better. But does making a bike more streamlined also mean it'll become greener than its four-wheel counterparts.
We've coned out the Alameda runway, and it is going to be our closed course for motorcycle testing today. I'm 40. We're going to use it to replicate the exact same conditions of freeway and city driving we had for the first round of vehicle testing. Jamie's going to start out on the motorcycle and do 7 laps all the way down to the end of the runway and back, which gives us 15 miles of freeway driving, just like we want. This is both the start line and the finish line after a bunch of laps. Then I've marked out a little city course of some stop and go traffic, and that Jamie has to do 25 laps of to give us the 7.5 miles of city driving we need, and that should give us a set of comparable numbers. No city course is complete without signage, and we've got signage. Heinemann Crossing. The course is fully set. We are ready to test. All we're waiting is for Jamie to arrive on his shiny new motorcycle. And here he comes now. On a steel horse, he rides. You know he's wanted, dead or alive.
Yep, first is the baseline for the bike without its fairing. But before Jamie gets on his bike, why did he choose it for the Beat the Car test?
The name of the game here was to find a motorcycle that is as environmentally friendly as anything currently available on the market. That means it needs to be of relatively small displacement, fuel injected, have a catalytic converter, and any other pollution controls available on motorcycles as of this date. So that's why we've selected this bike. It's a 250cc late model single-cylinder motorcycle that meets all of those qualifications.
And once again, the PEMS will sniff out all its emissions for this baseline test.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, remember, 7 big laps, 25 small ones. I'll be counting them down. Here we go, late model, low displacement bike test, and 3, 2, 1, go!
Oops.
One more time. In 3, 2, 1, go! And now we wait.
First off, Jamie goes round in circles at 50 miles per hour for 15 miles of freeway driving.
Now it's time for some city driving.
Then he's in the loop for the city conditions, complete with a stop sign at a 25 mile per hour speed limit. Finally, after looping both loops for 30 minutes in the saddle,
now it's a finish line.
It's time to get a readout on the control data.
The results are in. We have our baseline for our modern bike. The good news is that it's the most fuel-efficient bike we've tested by far, and it gave the cars the best run for their money we've yet achieved. The bad news? Its dangerous emissions are still surprisingly high. Will our aerodynamic fairing increase the fuel efficiency, and will the increase in that fuel efficiency dilute the dangerous gases? I don't know, but it's time to bring out the bubble. The bubble bike is ready for testing. Same track, same speed. Let's see how it stacks up.
Their pimped-out ride should reduce the drag on the bike and make it far more fuel efficient, and thereby minimize its harmful emissions.
Now it's time to put my money where my mouth is and see whether this thing does what it was designed to do, which is to improve the aerodynamic efficiency of this motorcycle and hence reduce its impact on the planet. Hopefully it'll do that and I won't crash or something in the process.
Oh, the prototype approaches. Are you ready for this?
I am, all set.
All right, on the green flag. Bubble bike in 3, 2, 1, go! Restart. Bubble bike test in 3, 2, 1, go! That's the second time he popped the clutch on the starting line.
After an identical start, it's an identical course, starting with a pedal-to-the-metal blast of freeway driving.
Lap 1 is away. You know those old films of like people trying to take off of cliffs and flying machines and they crash when they land?
That's exactly what that thing looks like.
I'm getting to like this.
Then it's science fiction in motion as Jamie puts the bubble through its city driving paces.
It's getting kind of hot in here.
All right, Jamie, this is your last lap. Last lap.
And with that, Jamie's bubbly ride comes to an end.
Nice work, man. You are done. How'd that feel?
This thing is crazy, but I kind of like it.
I'll tell you, it looks like a weird kind of primordial airplane every time it takes off down the lane. It's gorgeous.
This thing really made me nervous at first because you can really feel the wind, a little gust, and it kind of pushes you sideways. But after a while, I started to dig it because it doesn't involve the kind of buffeting that you normally have on a motorcycle. You know, you're going down the road like this, and this thing is just smooth as butter. Occasionally, you kind of glide a little this way or that way if there's a strong wind, but it seemed to work quite well. The only question here is whether it takes less power to push it through the air, and that, from inside here, I can't really tell. We'll have to let the computer tell us.
Indeed, finally it's down to the emissions data to either confirm or burst this eco bubble.
I wish we had a second bike, then we could ride the two of them off into the sunset, you know?
Sure, why not? Like the sign says, it's crunch time. Let's have a look at the numbers.
All right, let's take a look and see how we did in the fuel economy category.
Well, the fairing bike did pretty well. It got 70.9 miles per gallon.
It's the best across the board. Now, I would expect, because of the increase in fuel efficiency, to see a corresponding drop in carbon dioxide emissions. Let's call up the carbon dioxide chart and see how we did.
And there you go, 105 grams. That's a fraction of everything else on the chart.
That is fantastic. Now I'd like to see how we did in all of the other emissions. Let's call up the last chart. Oh.
Not so good.
It is solidly in the middle, and the cars are still winning hands down.
Yep.
Where does that leave us?
Well, you know, it's tricky, because if you look at CO2 alone, the bikes win by a large margin.
But if you look at all the other pollutants, then the cars are far better for the environment.
I think it's got to be busted, and here's why. Over time, cars have made a remarkable improvement very steadily. And the bikes, well, the bikes have gotten better, but not near as much.
Yep, I agree. At this point in time, it is not better for the environment to trade your car for a bike.
In the deserts of New Mexico, it's time to test the survivability of this. But before they bring in the dummies, there's just one problem.
Oh, I lost my head.
Okay, John, so based on our data, if an RPG shooter and a gun shooter are 80 feet apart, the RPG and the bullet will meet at 16 feet in front of the RPG shooter. What do you think about this?
The biggest problem with that is that the RPG won't be armed at 16 feet. It takes a lot farther to get out. The RPG is just going to keep right on going like a really big bullet.
Yep, and that's all down to the two stages of the RPG's firing system. The first stage of ignition throws the grenade out of the launcher at around 384 feet per second. This sudden acceleration triggers stage 2, activating the rocket propulsion and arming the warhead. So unlike the movie, the rocket must be at least 60 feet from its target to arm.
So it looks like the myth is pretty much busted outright, but what if it were a fluke? How could we still look at this explosion?
We can do this by actually moving the target farther away from the RPG launcher to a range where it will actually be armed and positioning our dummies in the appropriate positions for the two individuals.
All right. Can I fire the RPG?
Ooh, we'll see.
Yes!
Right, all is not lost. For the final parameter of survivability, they'll tweak the setup to simulate a faulty RPG. This time, the RPG will fire from 60 feet behind the stand-in Rocketeer.
I think we might have to increase our budget on mannequins. This is a pretty ugly woman.
Come here often.
And just like the movie, 16 feet in front of her is where the now armed warhead will trigger. But instead of a bullet...
Now this piece of acrylic is representing our bullet. Now we know once the RPG is armed, it doesn't take much to set it off.
And finally, 64 feet from that is where a gun-toting dummy will be positioned.
Oh, wait a minute, you're John Malkovich. You don't get any hair.
And for the lethality of the blast, well, each dummy will have 2 gauges.
All right, what I have here is a large piece of pork belly. This is gonna act like our human flesh. That's good, I like that. It's a nice hat.
Firstly, the gory, low-tech version.
Oh, God, it smells so bad.
It's got muscle, it's got flesh, it's got fat. The shrapnel goes through this and through the mannequin. We know that's a kill.
And second, the excitingly named high-tech version.
To measure the blast wave of the explosion, we're using this. It's a bikini gauge.
You know, when you said bikini gauge, I had something totally different in mind.
Now, the way it works is that we have foil spread over holes that represent different tolerances for the overpressure. When the foil bursts, that will indicate our number. Now, if this right here bursts, that's 20 to 25 PSI. That means that our shooters died from just the pressure wave.
With everything set,
Perfect.
let's count down to launch with a prediction.
Nothing ever happens like it does in the movies. I mean, our woman is only 16 feet away from the explosion site, and 64 feet is really not that far away when you see the destructive force of an RPG. I think everybody's dying.
Well, there's only one way to find out. They're bunkering down for the RPG survivability.
Okay, this is survivability test, RPG shooter versus bullet shooter.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That was intense.
Intense is right. Unsurprisingly, the RPG detonates and throws forward a shower of molten copper and debris. But did the dummies survive it?
I don't believe this. She's still alive. In the movie, she was totally decimated.
Yeah, and that goes along with what we've been seeing with these RPGs. I mean, they're not like regular grenades. It's very directional. But look at that. Our bikini gauges are still intact, which means she would have survived that blast wave.
Unlike the movie, the villain made it through. But more surprisingly, so did the good guy.
Oh my God, that is incredible. He did not get touched. I mean, he didn't get hit by one single bit. And look, our bikini gauge didn't get ruptured.
Yeah, he may have survived, but just by luck, there was a stream of molten copper coming straight at him. If he were 1 foot over, he'd be totally Swiss cheese.
Especially since in the movie, the warhead would not have been armed on contact with the bullet, but on contact with the gun-toting good guy.
Yeah, this is the exact opposite of what it was in the movie. He would likely have been killed, and she would likely have survived. It's busted.
Totally busted.
Hollywood, not being scientifically accurate again.
Huh. Look, I'll admit it, I was fooled by Hollywood, but here's why. Normally when we see an RPG hit something, there's a big flash and then that thing explodes. But in this case, the RPG exploded in mid-air. There was nothing to create any shrapnel. And the bullet, it didn't have very much mass, so there's nothing to stop that energy in its tracks. As a result, all the energy went forward exactly as it was designed to.
Well, that didn't suck. No, it didn't.
Another day of work for the MythBusters.